Welcome to the Wolves and Sheep podcast. I'm Roberta Glass, and today we're going to be talking about NXIVM. It takes a village to build a cult. So NXIVM is a 20-year-old cult started by a self-proclaimed genius, Keith Raniere, who claims he has one of the highest IQs in the world. And it has been running out of Albany, New York, and has been giving very expensive self-help courses for quite some time. And these allegations of sexual exploitation, financial exploitation, I would guess cult-like activities, have been going on for years. And if you follow, like I have been following, the tale of the Bronfman sisters, who are the daughters of Edgar Bronfman, who ran the Seagram's company, who bought Universal Pictures, you will know that the Bronfman daughters have been devotees to NXIVM for quite some time and have been giving millions of dollars to Keith Raniere and roping people in to keep this thing going. There have also been famous people like Catherine Oxenberg and her daughter, as well as Richard Branson, who have taken courses from NXIVM. So this is not some small fly-by-night cult. This cult has been around for quite some time. But only in the past year has it been getting really a lot of attention. When the New York Times in November 2017 came out with a story about sort of like NXIVM's like a big octopus with lots of tentacles, and one of the little umbrella organizations is called Jeunesse. And in that Jeunesse is a women's organization for women's empowerment, of course, so Orwellian, really women's enslavement. Under it was a secret club of women called DOS, meaning dominant over submissive in Latin. Of course, he has to put it in Latin because Keith Raniere is a total narcissist, and it wouldn't be good enough just to have dominant over submissive in English. So the head of that DOS group was the actress from Smallville, Allison Mack. And she was going out to her attractive young women friends and saying, would you like to join this secret organization? And she gathered for them, before they committed to the organization, collateral. So she would get things like confessions, naked pictures, pornographic tapes, and she would hold them as collateral if they ever wanted to refuse any kind of order, or if they decided to leave. So when they agreed to be part of this, they weren't really given all the information, as you can imagine. Before they became slaves, they had an initiation ceremony, and they were brought in blindfolded into Allison Mack's home in upstate New York, put on tables, and branded with a surgical tool. So it wouldn't be just enough to brand them with like a hot iron. This was a surgical tool that it took about a half an hour with the smell of burning flesh permeating the air, with other members holding them down, crying from pain. And Allison Mack telling them, just think about the master. So this is some really sadistic stuff going on. After the ceremony, they also were encouraged to not let the skin heal right away so that it would be more visible. And what was engraved into their hip bones was the combined initials of Keith Raniere and Allison Mack. They didn't know that at the time. And all of these women have it on their hip bone, this branding. So when this came out, and also it came out that Catherine Oxenberg had just taken her daughter to, one session, had left, was not interested, but her daughter was very interested in NXIVM and stayed and became part of this cult. And Catherine Oxenberg educated herself and found out very quickly that this was a cult and wanted to get her daughter out and started speaking out. And if you look into Catherine Oxenberg's history, you can see that she's, her bloodline is a royal bloodline. And she must know a lot of powerful people, because it took, from her speaking out, it took less than 5 years for this thing to get shut down. So I guess when you have a powerful voice speaking, it goes a long way. And when the New York Times reported on it in November, people really started to get scared that this cult woman branding cult was going around. And the women in DOS were expected to sleep with Keith Raniere. And I'm sure that Allison Mack who also was sleeping with Keith Raniere, was asked to do a lot of things. Because that kind of control, he was also described as limiting, this DOS group, limiting their diet to under 800 calories a day. Because Keith Raniere liked women skinny, very skinny. And he also had a thing for underage women, underage girls. And that is nothing new. Because the story came out when he had a group before, a business really, before he started the NXIVM group called Consumers Byline. And you can see a funny marketing video for Consumers Byline from 30 years ago, probably. And Keith Raniere is looking into the camera, and he's saying, "It's wonderful. It's great." And he's punching those positive words, and you wonder if I wonder if he's using neurolinguistic programming to give the viewers a very positive feeling about Consumers Byline. But he's very awkward and very stiff in this, and it's a humorous watch, one of the few humorous watches. But what has come out since Mack's arrest is the video for Jeunesse, which is the public group that DOS is under, which is the women's group, and her talking about it. So let's hear what Allison Mack has to say about Jeunesse. So here she gets asked what's like working for Jeunesse.
Working for Jeunesse, I think, is the most gratifying thing that I've ever done. It's the most challenging thing I've ever done, because it consists of working with a group of people in a way that is totally interdependent, meaning we're all working together and no one is ever punished and no one is ever told that they're wrong or they're bad. And the most important thing in working on Jeunesse is the relationships in Jeunesse. And I'm not used to that. I'm used to the objective being met. I'm used to having strict, hard, fast deadlines and lots of fear and punishment if I don't get it right. And in working for Jeunesse, there isn't any of that. So it comes purely from a place of self-motivation and self-direction. And that is really difficult. But I would say that working for Jeunesse is the most satisfying and purposeful thing I've ever done. Watching the women who are involved in Jeunesse completely transform and evolve in a way that is so pure is such a privilege. And really literally seeing people's lives path completely turn 180 degrees, where in one moment they really felt like this was all that they had and this was all that they could do, and then all of a sudden they come through Jeunesse and they start working with us and in our community, and it's like a whole nother life is born out of their new experience of themselves. And that.
So did you hear that? No one is punished. No one is told that they are bad. It's so funny when people describe something in the negative. It's like, I didn't have a picnic this weekend. So she's telling you what it's like, but she's telling you what isn't going on. So what isn't going on is no one is told they're bad, no one is punished, and it's a little, a little like, I didn't go to the park this weekend. What did you do this weekend? I didn't go to the park. I didn't go to a music concert, and I did not have a glass of wine. Okay, well, that tells me nothing about what you did this weekend. So when things are in the negative like that, and she's telling you nobody's being punished, nobody's told they're bad, you would have to think that this organization is punishing people, telling them they're bad, controlling them with fear. And that description goes on forever, doesn't it? I mean, geez, lady, you would think that you would get a little bit more to the point there. But they're very interesting videos because she's talking in kind of platitudes about authenticity and owning up and taking responsibility and love and happiness and connectedness. And you wonder if she had sort of a kind of great experience at first, and then it's gradually kind of spiraled out of control, and she's in this very tightly controlled environment, and she seems terrified of saying the wrong thing. She's smiling in this really tight kind of smile, and she's grasping her fist, and she seems very tense and concerned that she might mess up and say the wrong thing or not please Keith Raniere, who I'm sure would have to approve this. So I guess I'm going to keep the video short today, but I've been following NXIVM for quite some time and in 2009, when the Dalai Lama accepted $1 million from NXIVM, and he came and he spoke and he gave Keith Raniere a white sash, he was legitimizing what was a cult. And you can't say he didn't know, because he canceled right away, and then so that it looked like he canceled and that he was refusing the money, and then he appeared very close to that date that he canceled. So rarely do I hear the Dalai Lama's name mentioned with NXIVM. Took $1 million. $1 million from a cult. No repercussions. And then I read that it's a woman-run cult. As if cults share power. NXIVM is no sooner a woman-run cult as the Manson family was a woman-run cult. Cults do not share power. It is all being run by one person. And for those of you that watched Wild Wild Country about the Rajneesh, very similar thing. One guy ran that cult under his direction with women minions who took the fall for him, and he went off with very little punishment. This, I don't think it will go down that way. But Keith Raniere exploited women, exploited their energy, exploited their sexuality, and also abused children, underage girls. But when he was abusing underage girls, nobody cared. When he was sexually exploiting them, nobody cared. I mean, I can't tell you how many stories came out. Verified stories came out about him, year after year after year after year. And it wasn't until Allison Mack got involved and women started showing the brand on their hip, and it became kind of sexualized in the press, and Catherine Oxenberg started speaking, did people really take notice? It's very curious to me the way that this is being reported. And Allison Mack's, I think, power in the organization is being exaggerated. I mean, in some ways, she has to take responsibility just the way the Manson women had to take responsibility and take the punishment. But this is mind control, and she's doing the wishes of Keith Raniere. Doesn't excuse her behavior. But let's have some understanding about how this thing works. It's a woman-run cult. A sex cult. This is not really about sex as much as it was about power. About starving women, controlling women, making them slaves, taking away all the kind of humanness from them. Very rapey way. So, I don't know. I feel very distressed about the understanding of what the goals and aims of feminism are, if we're going to talk about it, or just existing as a woman in the society. And people's feathers really get ruffled when you mention feminism. But really, the goal of feminism was to allow women to be complete human beings. Allow them to have boundaries to their body and have control over their lives. Let them have choices. And live as complete human beings, not just sex objects, not slaves, as complete human beings. And that just seems to be a hard concept for people to wrap their head around. And when I hear other people who follow true crime talk about a case and they can't remember the woman's name, it's distressing to me. You think, do you have a daughter? Do you remember what it's like? Because it seems like when you can't remember the victim's name and you can remember the male murderer, that she's not really that important. So it'll be interesting to watch how this goes down. Before Allison Mack was arrested, there was a lot of talk. Apparently, the jeunesse portion of NXIVM gathered in Brooklyn, next door to where I am now in Manhattan, and got together and say, we're going to take the fall for Keith. We think it would be in our best interest for our own personal growth if we all owned up and took responsibility and said this was all our idea and Keith had nothing to do with it. Like, that really would have flown. But I found it very interesting because Scientology, when they got caught in Operation Snow White, Mary Sue Hubbard took the fall for L. Ron, and many other people, some women, some men, took the fall for him, and he went, and he just continued on, sailing on. I don't think this is possible for Keith Raniere. I think his ship has sailed. I think this guy's going to do life. Forget it. It's over. His story is over. Allison Mack, will she turn and give evidence against him? I don't know. It's very interesting. How deep does her indoctrination run? How soon can she be deprogrammed? What's her understanding of this experience? I have no idea. And I think she seems narcissistic. I think she was attracted to NXIVM because she could get to explore herself and all the facets of herself. So I think that she will save herself and she will probably testify against him. But I would be very surprised if she doesn't do jail time. Because $5 million in bail is no joke. But the reporting on this, if you want to read the history of NXIVM, I will try to link the Niagara Reporter with Frank Parlato, who was the spokesperson or the PR person for NXIVM, and who became a ardent reporter of the goings-on of NXIVM. Sorry. I always think of NXIVM like the pill that you take for your stomach. Is that something else? And those pieces are amazing. And you can read piece after piece and tell me how nothing happened for years. Years, nothing happened after he wrote them. But it's another case of a man having really big issues around women and their power and playing out a fantasy of absolute control of their sleep. He kept them up on very little sleep, controlling their bodies, making them extremely skinny, controlling their food, controlling their thoughts, dictating what he wanted sexually, dictating their sex life. I mean, every part of those women were controlled by one man. And that is a sick, sick, sick fantasy.